Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Gentlemen, how are you today?
Good to see you, Mark.
Likewise,
Very
Renato.
good.
Tucker?
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
I think it's kind of funny. We're all probably in about a 7-mile, distance of each other. But we meet virtually because it's convenient with the technology that we have.
And it's raining. So why are we going to go out and get wet if we can be here in the warmth of our houses, right?
We call this liquid sunshine in the Pacific Northwest. So welcome. Hey, first off, thank you for coming on memoQ Talks. I'm really excited to talk to you. I want to cover some of the most important industry trends related to technology and the opportunities that it presents, what's driving these trends, whether it's the technology itself or some external factors. We want to talk about how it's affecting businesses and individuals in our industry. And so there's a lot there to cover. But before we do that, you guys have been in the industry for a long time. And I'd like to get your thoughts on, you've went through similar times in the past when we went from, say, fax to email. We went from word processors to CAT tools. We introduced, translation management systems, TMSs, and then, of course, machine translation. During those times, I'm sure that there was a lot of hype. There was this, the trough of disillusionment. And then there was some traction and things took off. But there were a lot of people that were predicting this is going to be the end of the translation industry or end of some specific roles. For example, translators, MT is going to kill the job of a translator. Didn't necessarily materialize for a variety of reasons, including this global explosion of content. But before we talk about what's going on today, let's talk about what's happened in the past and what your observations are. Renato, you were there in the middle of this. Did you get caught up in the hype? What
was
did
it
you
hard
see?
to transition away from stone tablets and chisels, Renato?
Let's jump forward. He was there, but let's jump forward.
With yellow pads and pencils. This is how I really started translating. But I'm from the correctable typewriter period. That was the biggest invention at the time, where we didn't and Xerox machines that you could have an affordable copier in your office, so you didn't need to work with carbon paper, which is what we used most of the time. So I did see several transitions, and I have seen the end and the demise of the translation industry every single time, every new technology that there was. And it reminds me of I once learned about an initiative called the Cochrane Initiative, which has nothing to do with the language industry. It's an initiative that tried to bring evidence and data to the medical industry. And it was called evidence-based medicine instead of eminence-based medicine. That is, medicine based on data and facts instead of the authority of the doctors that have been doing that for many years. This is an initiative that started in the 1970s and took a long way to take hold because there was a lot of resistance from the old doctors. And I heard an interview with one of the creators of this Cochrane Initiative, which is a movement that exists until today. And they actually consume a lot of translation. It's a nonprofit initiative. And one of the things that came out of that, they were interviewing the founder and they said, how did you get over that initial resistance? How did the industry get over all those naysayers in the beginning that said that this is not the way we do medicine? And the guy said, those people eventually died. And we have a new generation that took over.
Problem solved. Just got to outlast them.
What I can think is that the people that resisted the most for the transition of typewriters to computers. I heard a translator say that he had a sensual relationship with the keyboard of his typewriter. I met a translator that left the translation industry in the late 80s because we read an article that was shared not by email because it wasn't widespread, but it was shared by fax and copies and things like that, that Xerox was doing a pilot using machine translation.
And that was going to be the end.
A page. Oh, that was the end. You could put a page. Imagine people weren't using computers or printers. You could scan a page of paper on a copier and it would print a translation of that page using OCR and machine translation and printing it out. Nobody thought of machine translation the way that we use it today. So that was very advanced. And this guy said, this is the end of the translation industry. And he went to work as a bank teller.
Hopefully you bought his company.
Job disappeared. No, there are no more bank tellers. That job disappeared before ours did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of a cycle. And we are in the beginning of a new cycle. And all I can say, and Tucker, you're 2 generations younger than I am. I think that
so you're saying it's my problem.
It's your problem. And your kid's problem and my kid's
Good luck.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is that we always come out stronger. And the times that we're living now, and I heard this the other day and I fully endorse it, is the fact that the AI that we're using today is probably the worst AI that we were ever going to use. Yeah. Because it's going to get better, it's going to change, it's going to improve. And what we're doing now is like the first search.
It's the dial-up. It's the dial-up internet of artificial intelligence, right? Exactly. Remember back when you got your first dial-up internet connection, you had to hang up all of the telephones because you only had one phone line and it was 56 kilobytes per second or whatever it was. And you were happy to have it. You were thrilled. Wow, this is going to change the world. And nowadays, you couldn't survive on a dial-up internet connection, right? So what's interesting is to see where this is going to go, because we're in the nascent period right now, and we're creating a new generation of native technology users. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't born with, but we had a dial-up internet in our house. I was on the internet by the time I was in 5th, 6th grade, probably. And to me, it's just a normal technology. It's part of everyday life. Whereas this new AI and large language models, this is new and scary, and I don't understand it yet. And so when my dear mother has a problem with the computer, she calls me for help because I speak that language natively, and it confuses her. And this AI, this is what I'm going to be calling my kids about in 20 years when I need help with the AI machine, because I don't understand it, but they're born with it. So it's just a native technology. Now, that's not to say that if you're over the age of 30 years old, you're doomed. I mean, we can keep up with technology, keep up with learning it, and I highly recommend that people do, because as Renato has pointed out and gave a few anecdotes, those that resist it are going to be left by the wayside, right? Those that embrace it are going to continue to flourish in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge lesson learned there. And I've seen it from my perspective in the local industry. For example, when it came to cat tools, there were a lot of countries in Asia that were really slow to embrace them. And they said, oh, it's not going to work here. It's not going to happen. And they lost out on a lot of opportunities. But the companies that were willing to embrace those tools thrived and were able to take up massive market share, mostly based upon their use of the tools. So what I'm hearing you say is, we can't put the genie back in the bottle, and it's something that we should learn to not look at as a threat, but something that we as an enabler. I have one more question though. If we're looking in hindsight, one of the external dynamics that caused the prophecy of gloom and doom didn't come true for translators was this explosion in content, which was driven by the massive globalization over the last 30 years and all the online content, whether it's social media, streaming, etc. Those things also have made it, the local industry kind of at the core part of this, internationalism, global expansion of a variety of businesses. Do you think that there's something parallel to that today? As aside from the technology itself, is there an external driver that will pull us through?
Yes. First of all, the way I translated in 1981, 1982 is very, very, very different than the way that I translate today, right? Like I said, I used pencil and paper and dictionaries. It was a slow process. I had to have somebody else type my translations. It was reviewed by an editor that marked with a pen the changes that needed to be made. It was typed again, right? It was a very, very tedious, long process. Publishing a book was something that took almost a year because there were so many proofs, so many reviews, so many edits, so many changes, and so many machines and technologies involved in the process. So one of the things that we hear often, and it's the wrong question that keeps being asked, is when is machine translation or technology or Gen AI going to replace the translators? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 2016, with Google Neuro machine translation in 2016 was already translating in one day more than all translators in the world translate in 1 year. Right?
Wow.
A lot of you mentioned social media. Whoever paid money to translate a social media post, you just press a button, translate this, and it translates for you, right? It's been there. We've been living with it for the last several years, and we don't have any second thought. Who is going to pay minimum fee for a tweet? Nobody does that, right? So technology, this AI technology, which we're calling AI today, which is essentially machine translation, is a very visible form of AI that we have been interacting with for several years. It has replaced a ton of translation that nobody was ever going to pay for. Right? Mm-hmm. So what we're going through now is a new period of fear, which is the first stage in when a new technology takes over. A fear of irrelevance, a fear of being replaced by something, and that's done. We have been replaced by it a long time ago. But translators still work. Translators still make a living. There's still a business around that. And what is changing is the nature of work, how we work. And eventually the conversation that we are going to need to have at some point is going to be how we pay for that. How do we survive? How do we make a living? And this is different for different roles that we have in the business. So it's different for a translator than it is for a project manager, than it is for a vendor manager, than it is for an executive, than it is for a salesperson, than it is for other functions in our organization, research analysts, and so on. So this change is nothing different than has happened in the past. We're going to be doing more work in a different way, in a completely different way. I can interact, and I've been able to interact with the technology by voice for several years. Do we use it as much? No, because we are usually in environments that we cannot be talking to a machine and receiving feedback. And it's very annoying, when you go to the airport and you have those people who are on WhatsApp calls talking to their children on the other side of the country and loud in a different language.
I'm glad you say that, because it's becoming a norm now, where you go to Starbucks, you go to a restaurant or the airport, and people just will have their calls or just listen to a soccer game or anything and just on speaker, and it's becoming quite normal. It's still annoying.
That's the kind of stuff that annoys me. Maybe I'm old.
You're getting old, but it annoys me too. So maybe I'm getting old too. But like to your point, or to your question, Mark, you said that, all right, so we had the last revolution or disruption or whatever you want to call it is with machine translation. Everyone thought that translation was going away. What happened was there was even more content to translate because of that. So it created a whole separate market where, we could afford, because of machine translation, we could afford to translate more that typically we just wouldn't translate because it would be cost prohibitive, right?
Right.
And so there were risks and there were benefits. There were upsides and opportunities that came about because of machine translation. And now we have artificial intelligence, and I'll just use that term to lump in a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Sure.
So now we have artificial intelligence, and everyone's freaking out about the risks. We don't fully understand the risk yet. So there's a lot of fear because people are afraid of uncertainty. And what we're forgetting, or what we tend to forget, is that we also don't understand the opportunities yet. So just like all of that whole new market that was created because of machine translation, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, well, that happened. But at the time, we didn't realize that was what was going to happen. So with AI, there's going to be whole new markets that are created. And if I were bold enough to label myself a futurist, I might speculate as to what some of those markets are, but I'll refrain from that. I just know that this is the way. We've seen it time and time again in our industry. And I think, rumors.
Tucker, to your point, one of the things that we need to embrace and accept is that translation is virtually free. Right. So the economic model. So let me go back a little bit. Every transition, every innovation brings, if it is disruptive, it brings a change in some fundamental part of the business. Right. So I like to say that for me, the most innovative technology in the language industry, the one that had the biggest impact in the way we look at the industry, was email. Because email allowed us to work. Before email, you needed a Korean translator in Seattle. You went to the Yellow Pages and you found a Korean translator in Seattle. You needed an Igbo translator in Seattle. Good luck if you could find one, because you wouldn't find that in the Yellow Pages. You would send, I remember when I moved to the United States in 1999, some people were still sending projects by FedEx to on paper to be translated and to be sent back, right? It was FedEx was a revolution, was a new thing at the time. It was fast delivery and so on. So that transformation, what email allowed was for the concept of a native speaker in country being the best translator for a product wasn't possible before email, because it was long distance calls. It was very expensive to send faxes, international faxes. I don't know, $1.50 a minute or something like that to send a page was really expensive. So with email, we take for granted today that the best translators are in country and native speakers. We are going now for, I think that the first time I heard people saying that the per word price model was obsolete was the localization manager for Netscape at a LISA conference in 1992.
Yeah,
right?
It's been obsolete for a long time.
For a long time, but we haven't found anything better to use it.
Exactly.
But now, when with all the technology that we have, machine translation makes translation basically free. It's a fraction of a cent per word. That's not the economic value that we're providing anymore, right? Tucker and I wrote a book 7 years ago And one of the things that we discussed in the beginning of the book.
And you know we wrote that book because it was before ChatGPT.
Yeah, true.
Just saying. I have a feeling lots of people are going to be writing books in the next few years.
It's true. But one of the things that came out from that exercise, and it was a conversation that we had, Tucker, if you remember, is that we wanted to write a book that was going to be true regardless of technology. Because back in 2017, I knew that technology was going to change because it had changed. Every year, there's something new. So if I write anything talking about technology at any time in history, it becomes obsolete in a very short time. Mm-hmm. So we discussed that what we agreed is that we were going to write a book about the foundations, the things that don't change in the industry. So the reality is that in this moment of technology development, the story for the translator is very different than the story for the translation company. That is very different for the story for the translation buyer, right? The translation company, the one that sells project management, workflow management, taking content from here, converting it into a different language and putting it there, this is not going to change. What is going to change is who are the players in this process and how they're paid, right? So the role of the translator as a translator that I knew when I started in the translation industry, the reality that came around with, I used to have a collection of 3,000 dictionaries. How many people have dictionaries these days? Nobody uses dictionaries. It's all online, right? So this changes the role of the translator. Maybe the name is not going to be translator anymore. It's going to be some other name. It's always going to be translator. It doesn't matter because the function is there. But the role, the activities that this person does are going to be very different than they are today. So the way we reward their effort, the work, is the metric of the per word metric is obsolete. And this is where we're going to see the biggest change, I think, in this iteration of the development of the language industry.
Okay, so thank you for that. Let me ask you though, on our traditional language service providers, what are the biggest changes that they're going to see based upon these new technologies? Is it more competition, less competition, different tool sets? They're working across different types of projects. If I'm an LSP owner and I'm looking at all these different tools, and we can go down into a rabbit hole of just even the sales enablement tools that are available now, like Gong AI and Seamless AI, and these tools that make you a better prospector, sale and delivering services. But
Gong is obsolete already.
Okay, but let's talk about if I'm an LSP owner, what tools do I need, and how is that going to change my business? And then at the same time, one of you take and put your translator hat on and say, okay, yeah, maybe the pricing model's obsolete, but if I want to stay working in this role, whatever it's called, in this kind of role, what do I need to do in terms of tools and skilling up?
Well, let's talk first about the LSP, the company, because as Renato says, it's very different stories for the translation company versus the translator versus the translator buyer. And so for the translator company, I think number one is be open to diversifying the types of services that you offer. Translation companies don't sell translation, they sell project management. It just happens to have, translation companies just happen to have a bunch of translators in their supply chain. Build new supply chains, right? What is it that your clients actually need at the end of the day? They need an effective way to communicate with their target audiences, right? Today, that requires translation. What else does it require? Because if translation becomes cheaper, then budgets are going to free up to spend more money on user experience testing, on culturalization, on in-market activities that have yet to be defined, right? So be open to diversifying your service offering beyond just translation. When it comes to technology, to answer that part of your question, I would say that technology is becoming a necessary prerequisite to any mature localization program. Used to be, I'd see companies translating without really relying upon technology that much. Everything was flying back and forth in Word docs, and you're just not seeing that anymore. You need some sort of technology offering. So technology literacy, I would say, would be a key component to any translation company. Now, that having been said, one thing I say all the time is that generally speaking, translation companies suck at technology and technology companies suck at translation or suck at language, right? We need each other. Translation companies need the technology companies. And that's why you see this whole ecosystem of language technology companies that has propped up over the last 10, 15 years. It didn't used to be that way. There was SDL and World Server, Idiom, and Deja Vu. I mean, there weren't that many options out there on the market. Nowadays, we have a plethora of options to choose from, and every one of those companies does something a little bit different, something.
Yeah, I would say that the role of the technology company is key in the sense that we're not going to be consuming, and we are not already consuming AI in the raw, in the wild. AI is always, for it to be most efficient, it is incorporated into a platform, right? You were talking about sales enablement. Yeah.
It's a feature.
It's a feature inside HubSpot, it's a feature inside Salesforce.com, right. It's a feature inside memoQ, it's a feature inside your HR management system, it's a feature inside your logistics system, and so on. So we interact with this, your email, Copilot, Excel, whatever. You're interacting with AI inside something else. It's a feature. It's like, I always mention this example of the spell checker, that I paid premium to buy a spell checker that I needed to install, and it didn't work with all the tools that you had and so on. And now, I mean, I have to manage the conflict of spell checkers because I have Grammarly, right. And then I have my Gmail, and then I open Microsoft Word. Each one of them has a grammar checker, a spell checker, and they're conflicting. And I correct something, and then the other tool comes and tells me to correct it back to what it was. And we already use spell checking and grammar checking as a feature inside a tool, a platform, or whatever. So I think that the way we're going to consume, and is the way that we are already consuming, I'm not describing the future, I'm describing the present, is inside, embedded into the technologies that we use.
So you don't see an LSP going out and buying quote unquote AI off the shelf. They're going to buy AI. It's going to be packaged inside of a TMS, inside of their CRM, or on some other type of workflow collaboration tool. That's how it's going to impact their workflows. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think
what is AI?
Yeah,
AI is a solution to a problem, right? Yeah. And we've talked. I'm sure I can say we, because I'm sure Renato's talked to these guys too. It's what we do. We're consultants. We talk to people in the industry, and a lot of folks come and say, "My boss tells me we need AI," and it's like, what a silly thing. What a silly question, right? It's not the right question to ask. It's like, how can I implement AI? It's all right. What problems do I have that I can use AI to start solving? Right. But AI is not the end goal. It is just another tool to solve those problems.
Totally agree. I remember during the .com explosion, there were a lot of companies like, hey, we need to have our internet strategy. But they were putting the cart in front of the horse and saying, instead of saying, what problem are we trying to solve? They're like, well, we need a website.
We need an app.
Yeah.
Then there was the app phase too. Everyone wanted an app.
iPad.
Right?
I remember talking to a CMO, trying to sell translations to them. And the CMO said, I can't get budget for that kind of stuff. But if you tell me that you're developing an app for an iPad, I'll get money coming up the wazoo, because there's budget. Every department wants to have their own app, and that was the big moment. And we had the content management system phase, and then we had the digital transformation phase that everybody was going through, and the e-commerce, and we're constantly going through cycles and new ideas and new things.
Well, let me ask you, because you guys talk with so many different companies, what are some of the more unique but impressive applications of some of these new technologies that you've seen in the context of our industry?
I could say that quality estimation, the concept of quality estimation, I think that Taos and Modelfront are companies that are pioneering in this effort, is something that seems, from the examples that I've seen, very efficient and promising, in the sense that you process machine translation before sending it for review, and with certain confidence you say, oh, this stuff is 98% good enough, you don't need to look at it. This stuff is stuff that you might need to have a human looking at it. And this will create a different role for the translator. So not too long ago, everybody was complaining about MTPE being a bastardization of the profession, and how this is dehumanizing, that you're correcting a robot. And now translators miss MTPE. They want MTPE. Oh, I had a discussion actually I followed a discussion in a translators group, and the conversation was between two senior translators. You know what? Today, I prefer to review a machine translation than to review human translation from rookies, from inexperienced translators that make mistakes that machine translation doesn't make. So we go to the point where those detractors, those people who were very afraid in the beginning, are saying, you know, I'm better off with the machine translation. And I've been saying this for many years, that translation is only news when it's bad. So it's very easy for us to share horror stories, to share mistakes. But you see, you find one mistake in 1 million words, and that becomes a very good story. When the real story is that there are 999,999 words that were perfectly fine, that were totally good, right?
Yeah.
And there's also this expectation that human translation is better than machine. But human translation also needs to go through a review process. And according to statistics, I think from Translated, the Italian company, the human translation quality is actually 92%. There's an 8% error that is embedded in human translations that need to be edited by a professional editor. And then we don't talk about the mistakes that are inserted by the editor, which is another problem completely. So I think that the conversation is going to change. Like Tucker said, it's hard to speculate, but we're going to have new titles. I wrote some time ago about the MT sommelier, the guy to choose the machine translation. That has become obsolete already. I must have written about this a couple of years ago. I think that now we're probably going to have something like a translation curator, or a translation moderator, arbiter. I don't know. There's going to be, what is that?
Stylist.
Yeah.
Just throwing in another buzzword there, but yeah.
Yeah, I was making a joke the other day that I said that that classic story about the mechanic, that a person has a car that has a weird noise, goes to several mechanics until is referred to this top mechanic, and the mechanic gets a hammer, hits the hammer, and the noise goes away. And the client asks how much for it, and the guy says $1,000. What? $1,000? You only hit the hammer. Okay, I'm sorry. It's $1 for hitting the hammer and $999 for knowing where to hit the hammer, right?
Exactly.
So I was adapting that joke, and I was saying, as a translator, I could offer translation is free, but I'm going to charge you 10 cents per word to have quality insurance, not quality assurance. It's to ensure if there is a problem that you can come back to me, and this is the insurance that the quality is going to be good. So translators don't complain when they can use machine translation and Gen AI to translate something, give it to the client. Don't tell the client that they use technology and charge full price for doing that kind of stuff. That was the amazing thing that we had at the beginning of translation memory, is that most clients didn't know about it, and you would increase your productivity and make a lot of money on top of that. I certainly did it until I said at one point, and I told it to him, Jochen Hummel, the founder of Trados, I say, you are the worst enemy of the industry. I'm a peaceful person. I never wanted to kill anybody. But if there was one person that I wanted to kill, is you, because you told customers that they could use translation memory. That should have been a secret just for us.
What, you mean you're not getting a discount for the matches? Oh, no.
Exactly. The client shouldn't know about that. That would be a tool for us. Right?
Been there, done that. Tucker, you were going to say something?
Oh, well, one thing I was going to point out too, that we're talking about the differences that's going to come about in the language industry. But remember, we're a services industry. We don't produce anything. We transform content. Mm-hmm. We don't produce a lot of content, right? And the generative AI is, well, it's just what it's called. It's generative. It creates things, right? So I think a lot of the changes that we're going to be seeing and responding to are not actually because we're implementing AI into our work streams. It's the upstream changes that are going to be happening. So the people that are actually creating content are using generative AI. And how is that going to change the way that we have to respond to that, the way that we transform that content? And we need to have an answer about that. And I tell localization leaders, you don't have to have AI in your work stream, but you have to have a story about AI. If you're asked, right? If your boss comes to you and say, what are you doing about AI? You don't have to say, we're using it and here's how, but you have to have a story around it. You have to have a vision around it. And I think a big part of that vision for a lot of people in different positions is how am I going to help enable and help guide my stakeholders upstream in the content lifecycle? How am I going to be able to help them and inform them so I can make sure that whatever they're doing is going to be localization friendly? And just like how machine translation freed up budgets or enabled us to translate much more with less, and it created this whole new market, this whole new approach to generating content is going to free up a lot more time and resources. In my estimation, it's going to free up a lot more time and resources to focus on more things that are speaking to the actual core of what we do in the language and services industry, which once again isn't translation. It's helping people have effective communication with their target audiences. Sometimes that communication is one way, sometimes that communication is two way. But if we're not spending all of our time and budget on translating words, then we can spend more of those resources on doing things that are moving the needle even further, or I would say deeper than we ever anticipated we would want to when it comes to reaching those audiences.
I think also there is an element that we forget to bring to the table when we're having these conversations, because we're using AI, generative AI, GPT, the same way that we use machine translation, or people from outside the industry use the concept of machine translation. We talk about machine translation as if it was one thing. But machine translation is different if you do English to Japanese and Japanese to English. These are two different approaches. The quality of Portuguese to French and French to Portuguese is different than English to Portuguese and Portuguese to English. So when you talk about AI and when you talk about machine translation, it's a complex environment. It's not a one thing that has the same performance across the board for all the tasks that you apply, right? And in addition to this, you have the complexity of the organizations that you're working with, right? So who is buying from you? What is the purpose of the content? What is the delivery mechanism that you're going to have? Where is your content going to appear? Who is going to be approving, reading, writing, hosting your content? This content doesn't exist in the vacuum. It has different stages, different homes inside the organization. And this complexity is very hard to automate. One of the things that I learned over the years is that it's very easy to automate complicated things. Complicated things, they are difficult. They have multiple steps. They have stages. But if you follow the steps, if you follow the instructions, you're able to complete a complicated task. But a complex problem is one where the variables are changing all the time. And what we deal as a translation company, as an LSP, as a service provider, is with complexity. Is handling different volumes, different workflows, different timelines, different types of content, different language combinations, etc., etc., etc. So what is a very good solution for English to German might not be a good solution for English to Korean or English to Tagalog or English to a minor language in South Africa, right? So, and I apologize for South Africans who feel offended if I said a minor language. I meant in the sense that
Elon Musk is on the phone right now calling me, complaining. What you're saying makes a ton of sense. Let me change it a bit, though, and say, in terms of these technologies that are being developed, one, are any or how many are being natively developed in our industry or being driven by our industry? And I guess that we could look at machine translation, but then the technologies around that. But also, what opportunities does that present to companies? So, for example, there's companies like Appen, Scientific. Gengo is a great example. Gengo was a crowdsourcing platform for mid-quality, low-quality translation. They rebranded as Gengo AI, and they started, providing AI training services, right? So that's a new opportunity. You have a technology, AI, the umbrella term, right? But this technology is driving demand for training services that are being provided by local industry companies, right? So in this case, the technology is providing opportunities for us, not just in terms of optimizing our workflows, but it's a whole brand new market for the local industry. What are you seeing in that?
Yeah, I think our industry, we're not building the hammer. We're the ones that know where to use the hammer, right? And because the amount of resources that go into building an AI, building a model, are just insane. The amount of data required, where are you going to get that data? Like, we just don't have the fundamental resources required to build that stuff ourselves in the language services.
There are open source models that some companies are piggybacking on, but
that's what I'm saying, right? It's like,
I think
we're going to be the ones using the open source models, right? Okay. And I think the winners, the true innovation from the language services industry, is going to be new and innovative ways to apply that to solve a problem.
I think that companies like Translated in Italy, Lilt, a couple of others, Kudo maybe in the interpretation space. These are some companies that are creating innovative products around AI. successfully. What happens? What is very natural in an industry that is mature as our industry has become is that a lot of these initiatives are going to happen in the smaller players that are more nimble, and then they're going to be guzzled by the big players. So I wouldn't be surprised if the first one we saw that we localize just bought a technology company, I forgot which one, a couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised if the top 10 LSPs in our list start buying some of these technologies from companies around the world. I don't know.
Well, you had TransPerfect made an acquisition. They acquired WordBee, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So that's technology that's already kind of, I would say, tried and true, accepted, generally used in the local industry.
Yeah, they bought the client portfolio in there, basically. But there are smaller players playing with technology. I think Blackbird, the Canadian company.
Fair enough. Yeah.
BureauWorks, the American Brazilian company. These are companies that are natively innovative, let's put it this way. They are incorporating this and they're looking at the problem more in a different way. It's different than what Trados is doing, which is a monster today that is 40 years old and is, I don't know where I read it or I heard this recently, that most users use less than 2% of the features that they could use in Trados. That it can do so many things so well, but most people don't use it. And this is true with any technology that we use. We're scratching the surface of the capabilities of some of these technologies.
But what about the second part of my question, though, or the growth of these technologies do provide market opportunities. So, in terms of, as I mentioned, Gango AI, where they pivoted and started providing AI training services, right?
But this is happening. This is happening all of the time in there, right? So if you look at the Language Technology Atlas, which we publish, you had last year, over 1,000 companies listed there. The year before it was 800. The year before it was 500. There is a proliferation of technology. It's very easy to start technology. And now there's a lot of money. If you put .ai or .io in your company, you can easily raise a couple of $1 million with a good story, because we're in the beginning of this hype cycle, right? Actually, I believe that we're already in the downturn. This was a very rapid hype cycle. But there's a lot of supply. It's like, let me give you a good story, a good example. Remote interpreting, virtual VRI, virtual remote interpreting. This technology has been around for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Several companies have developed it, and they were around. And we at Nimdzi were getting pitches about this all the time. Oh, we have this amazing tool that we created, and so on. Companies that we haven't heard of in a few years, because they would come and go all the time. And we said at some point that this was a solution in search of a problem. And then the problem happened. It was called the pandemic. And then everybody needed remote interpreting, because you couldn't go to places. There were no events. Everything was virtual. And then the technology was there, was ready to solve the problem. So we are in a moment of technology revolution, which is a combination of the implementation of 5G and the revolution or whatever of generative AI, of ChatGPT. The combination of these two things, which is a combination of infrastructure, computing capacity, speed, and things like that, with a new technology, this creates a new economic environment. We had that with the dot-com boom, We had that when the app revolution, the 4G revolution, when the iPhone and the App Store appeared, it was when 4G came out. That's what created Facebook, photo sharing. I don't know if you remember when you wanted to send a picture in the 3G phones. It would take forever, and it was a small square that you could barely see with lots of pixelation, right? Today, you send this high resolution videos in no time. And this things that enable change, enable new services. And the core of the business that we provide, that we exist in, is multilingual communication, is people communicating to other people in different languages. And this has a million shapes or forms, and platforms and vehicles. And it's oral, it's visual, it's written, it's audio. Multimodal is the word that is the word of the time, right? And it's complex, and it's going to become more complex. And by the time you solve one problem, there's a new problem that is going to appear. And maybe you have a solution. I'm trying to remember what was the situation that recently. It was something with the aerospace industry that they needed to find Pascal and Fortran programmers, people who were in their late 60s and 70s that were retired, and they needed to bring these people back because the knowledge about those programming languages had disappeared completely. And it was something, I think, around the banking industry, if I'm not mistaken. So sometimes the new skill is the old skill. Maybe if you wait a little bit, these things that we're complaining about that are becoming obsolete will be cool again. Let's see. I mean, if you watch science fiction and you see a world where there's no more electricity, Planet of the Apes, I don't know, we will need to remember how to read cursive. These things become important, you know?
Well, gentlemen, what I'm taking away from you guys is a couple key points. One is, embrace where we're at, embrace the technology, the future, because again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And there's always, with every threat, there's opportunities, and maybe don't worry too much about the threat. Focus on the positive side, on the opportunities there.
Well, it's easy to say that to a translator who is getting offers. And I did see the other day an offer that a translator got to translate, I don't know how many words, and it was 46 cents, the total value of the project. Yeah. And the person said, the time that I wasted reading this this project offer cost me more than what they're offering me to do. So there is pain in this change. There is pain in this transition, and we need to be aware and recognize. And as leaders, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and so on, and even as buyers of language services, we need to be aware that there are people in this process, that it's not all about doing it for free. It's not all about doing it for cheap, because the people who are going to buy the products of your company and the services of your company are translators too, are consumers that need to spend money. So we're part of an economy that needs to be turning, and we need to be sensitive and aware that in a transition period, we need to be empathetic to some of these problems. It's hard because we are in a capitalistic economy, and empathy is not necessarily a quantifiable P&L item.
We can be empathetic, but we also need to be realistic.
Absolutely.
Right? We're not doing anyone, feeling sorry for people doesn't do them any favors. It doesn't put food on the table, right? So I don't think it's unempathetic to say, translators, you should probably go out there and update your skill set, stay on top of the latest technology, and those type of things. when I say those things and I say them publicly, I mean no disrespect to the profession of translation or to the linguists out there that have devoted their lives to it. It's more just like, hey, this is what we need to be aware of, guys. And
it's happening,
Yep.
and you better go with the flow, and because you can't fight it. Thank you for that, guys, gentlemen. Let me ask you, what's Nimdzi up to? What's exciting in the context of what you guys are working on? Anything that you want to share with the audience?
Renato.
Well, every day is a new day for us, because the beauty of the type of work that we do is that we seldom repeat projects. We're always working on different challenges that clients have, and with different players. We work with enterprise clients, we work with LSPs, we work with government, we work with associations, we work with all the players in this space. And the challenges that they have are different according to their scale, according to their trajectory, where they are in their growth, development, maturity, and so on. So I'm a very lucky person, because every day I'm dealing with something different, something fun, something interesting. AI brings in a lot of uncertainty. And when you have uncertainty, you want to have anchors, and data and research and experience is one type of ballast, let's put it this way, for this uncertain times. So AI is here to stay, and we're very happy. I couldn't complain, right, Tucker?
Yeah, exciting stuff. Always, never a dull moment. Here at Nimdzi Insights, we work with some of the coolest companies in the industry,
And you're going to be
clueless.
And the coolest.
We have the coolest and the clueless.
Come meet us. We're at like every industry event. Recently, or coming up here, I'm going to be at Local World Dublin. So look forward to seeing you guys there, if there's any listeners that will be there. But yeah, you name an event, and we've probably got some Nimdzi folks there. So come say hi.
I think we're going to get you at the one of you two, or both of you, at the memoQ Day Seattle coming up in June.
That'll be fun.
You guys did a great job. Tucker, you did a great job there last year. Well, hey, thanks for both. I just have one more question. Renato, I know it's a stated goal of yours to visit, I think it's 2 new countries every year.
3 new countries every year.
3 new countries. And so what's on the list for 2024?
Well, I haven't figured it out yet. I did 1 new country. I did Belize in the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 new countries to go, but we still have 7 months in the year to go. I haven't figured it out. I'm missing 6 countries in Europe. If there is anybody from Kosovo, Montenegro. No, I've been to Montenegro. I've been to Montenegro.
I spent 7 weeks there in February and March. Loved it. On the beach.
Montenegro is amazing. Estonia. Belarus is not a good place to go these days.
Not right now.
Cyprus and Macedonia. That's the other one. So these are the countries that I'm missing in Europe. And I think there is an opportunity for me to go to Azerbaijan towards the end of the year. So I'm always wanting, invite me. I'll go.
Okay, you heard it here, people. If you're there, actually, Alessio, our CRO for Breeze Docs AI, formerly known as memoQ RFP, is just moved to Cyprus and enjoying it a lot. Yeah. Last question, I promise. It's just been gnawing away at me during this whole time. What did you do with the 3,000 dictionaries?
I was wondering that too.
Like, how do you explain that to your family? I mean, at what point does it become an obsession? You know, at what point do they say, "Hey, we need to talk to Renato about this, man"?
No, there is a very plausible. The good thing is that my family at the time was my ex-wife, who was a translator and my business partner. So we bought it together. It was a joint obsession.
Okay.
We built that collection over 25 years, right? And when we sold our company, there was an asset of the company back in 1997, and it went with the company. So I have no idea. The funny thing is that a few years ago, I was in Brazil, and Savio Levi, who's the country manager for Lionbridge in Brazil, used to work with me at the time. And he said, I have a present for you. And he gave me a box with a bunch of mementos from our company that was called Renato Beninatto, which was a book with the name, telephone number, and address of all the employees of the company that our HR department kept. So it was great to see that. There were 3 dictionaries that were left from that collection, and like little chotkas and mementos from that period, pictures and so on. So it was very cute and very emotional to receive that, especially the 3 dictionaries. And from there are 5 dictionaries that I haven't touched in years that I still carry with me because they had some emotional value for me. At that time, and this is an important lesson here, when dictionaries were important, I had the biggest library, and I had a librarian who classified all of those dictionaries. I had more dictionaries in my personal library, in my business library, than the Brazilian National Library in Rio de Janeiro. So I collected. Wherever I saw one, I would buy. But now it's easier to collect countries because they stay here.
Well, with that note, happy trails, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being on memoQ Talks, and I look forward to crossing paths with you in person someday soon. Cheers, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good to see you.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.